So we're here in Round Rock, Texas with, is it Peter or Coach Peter?
Peter's fine.
Okay, Peter Kaskan. He is the owner.
One of the owners. There are two of us.
One of the owners of Round Rock Fencing Club. And so we came to visit and see what you guys are doing and learn more about you.
Excellent. Welcome to Round Rock.
Thank you. So you mentioned there's more than one owners, right?
Yeah, so Round Rock was started in almost 40 years ago by Gary Murray. He retired just a couple years back. I say retired. He's still fairly active. He actually teaches a visually impaired blind fencing program at the moment, and he's been doing a little bit of stuff on and off since he retired. He was running a Lakeway program for us about an hour away from here that we've taken fully over. But about 2.5 years ago, he retired fully, and Alan and I, who'd already been coaching for him for a while, both bought the club from him so that there was continuity. I actually started with Gary in 1994 when I was 10, and then Alan started fencing at Texas State in San Marcos, but he fenced with Gary a little bit in the early 2000s, I think. And actually his wife fenced with me in the 90s at Round Rock. And so the two of us and his wife, who's actually our beginner coach, had all sort of been around Round Rock fencing peripherally for many decades. I took a break after college for a little while. So after '02, I sort of stopped fencing for a little while, and then I got back into it recreationally. And then when we moved back to Austin, we picked it. Me and my wife both picked it back up, but I really picked it back up and started coaching a year or two after that for Gary, and then sort of a natural transition to just running the club as he slowly sort of semi-retired and backed out of it until he fully dropped off.
So is that has the name changed because the location changed, right?
No, we've been the Round Rock Fencing Club for years and years. I know Gary made one attempt at a nonprofit before my time, I think in the late 80s or early 90s, that didn't go well, and the nonprofit had a similar but not identical name. I don't remember what it was. It was before my time. But no, we've been the Round Rock Fencing Club. For a while it was Gary doing business as Round Rock Fencing Club. Now it's Round Rock Fencing Club, the LLC. But it's still just Round Rock. So.
Okay. And for those, sorry, I should have mentioned this. We are actually in it's a rec center, right?
Yeah, it's the Brushy Creek Community Center down here in Round Rock. It's a municipal utility district, but it's essentially Round Rock. The first big facility was actually in a mall locally. The mall's not there anymore. That was in the 80s, and I don't have the full progression of facilities. There was a warehouse around here that was quite big. That's where it was when I started. As prices have gone up and up, it's been less and less viable. We were when I stopped in '02, we were in a large church gym up in Georgetown, about 15 miles north of here. Maybe not quite that far. I think we've been at the community center here for 13 years, 15 years, something like that. We are looking for a facility to try to offload at least competitive fencing and to have more age-driven classes. Right now, all the classes are all ages, all skill levels. We break things up as best we can. We've got assistant coaches running around helping, but it's still not ideal for teaching people. And we've been trying to support more competitive fencing. We've always been a recreational club. That's always been our focus. Right now, we've got 80 or 90 fencers, and maybe 25 of them, 30 of them do tournaments. But we want to be able to support them more. And at some point, that means getting a facility so we can shuffle things over. Given the pricing in Round Rock and the general area right now, our biggest goal is just to not lose money when we do that. So,
I get it.
So we're actively looking, to the point that I think Alan and maybe myself are going to go check out some places next week. So when I say actively looking, I mean right now. I mean we've been in progress for about 6 months. We had at least one landlord that wound up being a little bit sketchier than we wanted, so we declined to pursue that one. But we're still actively looking.
Well, good luck. I do know from experience, and we went through this too. Finding a place can be pretty difficult.
Oh yes.
Right? It's not so easy. Will they even allow what we do there is a question.
Yeah.
The price is crazy sometimes, and yeah.
And there are places on the periphery of Round Rock, Austin, Georgetown, Pflugerville that will allow for it, but we have an existing membership. If I could probably in Hutto find a relatively reasonable facility, but would we lose 2/3 of our fencers if we tried to move out there? I don't think we're going to move, but I want the ability to off-site at least some of it. But we've got to find something that at least 80% of our fencers could keep doing. Our goal is to let people fence for as long as they can. Kids, adults, whatever. We want fencing to be a lifetime sport for anybody we teach, and so we try not to price anybody out of the sport. We try not to location anybody out of the sport if we can avoid it. So we'll see where that goes. But it's been an interesting challenge.
That's cool. That's good.
So it sounds like the main reason why you're trying to open a new location because you have a What's the class?
Yeah, so Coach Murray, my retired head coach, who was taught by Michelle Middlebrook originally, who was one of Vinnie Bradford's students, who was the coach at UT for a number of years there, and Vinnie's still the head of U.S. Fencing Coaches Association. He's always supported competitive fencing to an extent, but his focus was just teaching it and having fun. But we had a couple. Sean McLean was, I think, first alternate to the Olympics. He started at our club. He eventually had to move on to other things. Tim French, who's the current Vet 40 to 50 national epee champion, go Tim. He started at our club years and years ago. He actually he's got his own club in Austin, Mustang, but he comes in periodically. They're shut down over the summer, so we see him a lot, which is good. He really elevates the level of fencing. So we want to be able to support people as far as we can. Obviously, if your goal is to get into an NCAA school or go to the Olympics, you can start here, but you're not going to end here. We don't have the depth of coaching or experience to really support that all the way. We will have to find you additional coaches and talk about what you want to do, because trying to go like to the Olympics or even getting recruited to a school is a full-time job in and of itself. It's not something you can do on 4 or 8 hours a week at a recreational club. So, but yeah, we've had some success in competitive fencing this year. We had no competitive fencers left after COVID. We didn't have a ton moving into that. Competitive had slowly been dying off over the last decade. And I think that there was interest from the kids, but a lot of the parents needed a little more pushing than we were able to give them, especially when it was just Coach Murray. Trying to run that many kids by himself was challenging. As myself and Alan came into the picture, it made it easier time-wise for us to really take them and explain what was going on and to give them the attention they needed and to go to tournaments and so forth. I probably went to at least 20 tournaments this last year, last 2 years. We've picked up a couple C's and a couple D's in epee, a couple E's in foil, kind of an E in saber. So, from nothing, we've come a long way, but we're not Alliance down in Houston or anything like that, or Olympian down in San Antonio. We don't have the depth and experience level of their coaching or just the sheer numbers. But we're actually making a good impact. We're winning some tournaments and getting some top 8 finishes, even at times when we're not expected to be. So it's fun to be the plucky underdogs.
So I'm putting together, just based on what you're saying, that with some of the other clubs you mentioned and everything like that, and the fencers. Do you guys only do epee, or do you do more than one?
No, I was a foil kid when I started. I switched primarily to epee as an adult because I was getting back into the sport, needed all my own gear, and I was not getting money for it from anywhere other than myself, and epee was cheaper to get into. And I'd always been thinking about making the swap. At the moment, I fence all 3 weapons. We teach all 3 weapons. Epee on the competitive side is where we're strongest. Foil is secondary competitively, which is amusing because our foil program is very small, because we'll give people the option of which weapon to go into after they get done with beginners. Foil is not as cool as epee or saber. Epee has no right of way. Saber's a cool weapon. So most of our kids pick one of those two. We're trying to figure out ways to get foil more interested. Most of the ones we have are actually quite good for especially for their experience level. They're exceptionally good, but we just don't have a lot of raw numbers there. I know TFA ran into that. I don't actually remember exactly what year ago, but TFA at some point switched from being a 3-weapon club and lost foil. Doesn't help that AFC is a phenomenal foil club in Austin with Maestro Eric Malay running it, and both Blake and Ben are fantastic and highly experienced coaches. We haven't lost a ton of people recently to AFC. We've lost a few in the past who were really serious, which more power to them. Like I encourage fencers to do whatever they need. We have a couple of fencers who do epee, open epee down there as well as at our club, because they have a really good core of competitive fencers who come up from, a lot of them actually are represented by Olympian down in San Antonio, but they fence over at AFC because most of them live in South Austin and so forth. But Olympian has Tommy Hermie and some really good coaches down there. Court and one of the Hurley sisters, I believe, Courtney, I think.
Courtney.
Yeah, she's coaching down there for them as well. All their coaches are phenomenal down at Olympian, but some of their fencers are up here. I'd love to get them in, but they'd have to wade through crowds of beginners, and that's not, when you're at a moderately high level. Even some of our competitive kids are getting frustrated by the amount of beginners that are always around and underfoot, which is a consequence of where we are and the amount of time that they allow us. It's one reason for looking for our own facilities, so we can do more focused open fencing, competitive open fencing, instead of just, here's 25 epee fencers. Some of them are 7 and have barely picked up a weapon. Some of them have been fencing their whole life. We've got a 60 or 70-year-old, I think, at least.
Wow.
We've got a mix of ages. It's predominantly kids, almost all kids. We really want an adult class, but they have not so far given us the time and room to do that, which is another reason for the offsite, so we can do age delineated classes, a youth class, a teenage class, an adult class. I've had a number of adults that are sort of iffy about joining with a bunch of kids. Plenty more that are not. Actually, some of my adults that fence are great and work with the kids and are practically assistant coaches of their own right. But I know many more would prefer to be more on their own or only with the older teenagers, the 13 and up open tournaments type thing. But yes, supporting competitive is the main reason we want our own facility. Also, there's a limit to how much we can grow here anyway, just space and size. But the competitive side is where it would be the nicest, which is probably not where the money is. I think most of the money is in like huge numbers of recreational fencers, but at least my personal interest is in competitive fencing. I really enjoy it. I think it's the best part of the sport. Just funny because I did not take it seriously as a kid. Like I did competitions. I went to a couple Junior Olympics, Summer Nationals. I had a D as a kid. It was, if I fenced now the way I did then with that dedication level, I would get crushed constantly. Like I was not a dedicated kid. But yeah, that's about it.
What introduced you to fencing?
Hmm?
Who brought you to the fencing?
Oh, Gary Murray, our old retired head coach. We moved to Round Rock from upstate New York in '94. I was about to turn 10, and we saw an article in the paper, and my mother asked me, did you want to fence? And I said, ooh, yeah, that sounds fun. So came on in and essentially never stopped. There have been times in my life where I couldn't do it because I was working nights or was just too busy, and I didn't really do it in college. I wish I had. Paul Schimmelman was the coach down at UT, and I took a couple classes for him, and I actually still take lessons from him occasionally, but I regret not diving into it more in college. So I've identified as a fencer pretty much since I started. But yeah, it was Round Rock and Gary Murray that got me started. So eventually going up the chain to Vinny and Pooj and so forth, because Pooj got half of the Texas coaches started. So
yeah. So what's your favorite weapon?
Favorite? I don't know.
You do epee now, but you grew up.
I do all three now competitively. Okay. I have the highest rank. I have a D in epee and E in foil, and I currently don't have a rating in saber. This is also my first year of doing veteran, which has been interesting. I think I like teaching epee the best. I'm certainly the most comfortable with it at the moment. All of them have changed dramatically from the 90s. Actually, I think foil and saber have changed more dramatically from the 90s. So that's
timing, right?
Yeah, the timing and the right-of-way rules. At the time, the box timing for foil hadn't changed. It was very much the flick meta, not so much the march meta. And marching in saber is now much more predominant than it was at the time. I think epee is probably my favorite. They're all good and interesting. Certainly to fence, I'm probably better at epee at the moment, but there's something comforting about the right-of-way weapons and knowing that as long as you hit them, you're safe. But I'm certainly better at epee, and I think I'm best as an epee coach, though I do fine at the other weapons. Really getting a crash course into the competitive scene over the last 3 or 4 years has helped, and I've taken a bunch of lessons and gone to classes and thrown myself into tournaments myself, just so I really knew what our kids were getting themselves into, because it had been a while and things had changed. And how tournaments were run, there was no adjustment there. Right. I had to use Fencing Time Live instead of looking at a sheet on the wall. But,
yeah, right.
Though that was half, I think, a COVID thing more than anything else. The first time somebody posted a sheet on the wall after the COVID restrictions relaxed, we were all cheering because it felt like the good old days. So,
but the other coaches, do they all also teach all three weapons?
So if we have a main epee coach, it's me. Alan is the other head coach and sort of our main armor, and epee is also his strongest suit. He's been really throwing himself into modern competitive foil, because we actually for years were a foil club, and so a lot of our foil and our assistant foil coaching has been much more of a classic foil, like, you have to extend to an attack. A march is not really a valid thing. They'll teach you how to deal with it, but certainly not how to do it. And so he's been trying to bring it more to the modern era. And so he's been throwing himself into that. And so while I think his strength is still epee, he is currently our main foil coach. And then our primary saber coach is mostly a saber and epee guy. He actually started with Round Rock, Coach Chris, before I did. He started in the 80s. He's a little bit older than I am, but he stopped for years and took some breaks. I don't have his full trajectory there, but he is back as a coach for us, and he's running saber, which has been tremendously helpful. We also got I'm going to forget if I don't list all our coaches. It's an accident, but Coach Michael has some issues getting to the facility, but if I could use him as a primary saber coach, I would a lot of the time, because he's got the most saber competitive experience of any of us. And he has worked for Slaughter's Club up in Dallas. That's Slaughter's at Globus or Frisco?
No. That's Coach Lee. I think you're talking about Frisco?
Yeah, I know he's worked for Coach Slaughter. I don't know whether it was at Frisco or somewhere else. And I know he worked for another Sabre club that briefly existed in Austin, but he does a bunch of one-on-ones outside of the club. And when he can get here, he does. It's just challenging for him. So the other owner is also, I think, primarily an epee guy initially, which is why after COVID, and the reason our epee program is the strongest is just because after COVID, epee rebuilt the fastest. Sabre has the most numbers. Some days it's epee. Most of the time it's Sabre. But epee is definitely where we're strongest at a competitive level. Though, as I said, my goal is always to I want you to fence what you want. I want you to enjoy it for your whole life. If that means you never set foot in a tournament, that's fine. I think tournaments are fun. If money wasn't an issue, I'd make everybody do tournaments because I think they're really entertaining. But between money and the risk of parents burning their kids out, I don't want anybody doing tournaments who does not want to be there. We don't recruit for the team. The people who go to tournaments are the people who told me, hey, I want to do a tournament. And then we'll have a conversation about how to get there, what you need to do. We'll set up a meeting with the parents, make sure the parents are willing to support them. But I don't want the parents to be the one pushing them. It's got to be the kid. The kid has to want to do it. If they don't want to do it, I've lost since I started coaching with the club, probably around COVID-ish, we've lost 4 or 5 kids to other clubs for competitive reasons. So good. 4 or 5 kids to other clubs because they wanted more focus. And at least half of those have dropped out of fencing from burnout because it was the parents pushing. Some of them haven't. And the ones who it's the kids who are driving it, I'm like, more power to them. I want them to go where they feel like they will get the best results. They're always welcome to come and do open fencing here. I do not have an ego about coaching. I am not picky. There are many better coaches in the world than me. I want you to go where you will get the best coaching. I'm a lot better than I was 5 years ago, but I've still got an immense amount to learn. We all do. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, but our big goal is to make sure that kids are safe, happy, and well-adjusted. Adults too, safe, happy, well-adjusted. Competitive results are like 4th or 5th down the priority list compared to, safety, respect, fun, being a well-adjusted human being. These are the really important things for us, not going to the Olympics. So
For competitive class, what do you think the tendency we have right now? Some students do, let's say, foil for like a couple of years, maybe 5-7 years, and they suddenly see that their results not so good, and they start to switch to epee. What is your opinion about this? Is it good? No? Good?
Ultimately, that's up to the fencer. Early on, I find it somewhat challenging, like the first 6 months to a year, especially for kids who are like going through puberty or haven't hit puberty yet. It can often be challenging for their muscles to do different things, especially like Sabre muscles are very different than epee muscles. Like when I started doing Sabre again competitively, my arm hurt. I've been fencing since I was 10. My arm never hurts, but just the muscle groups were different. Once they've been fencing for a while, I don't have a problem with it. Certainly, once you start to hit like 18, 19, or even a little before then, once you hit like late teenage age, I think it's probably beneficial to get at least some experience. And then there's always what if you're a prodigy at Sabre, but you've only ever been doing epee, you wouldn't know if you didn't do it. I don't necessarily encourage it, partially because they don't really have the time. It also depends on their goals. If your goal is like, I want to be competitive and get high level results, it's probably good for you to do all 3 weapons, but we don't have the hours. And if you only spend a couple hours every week doing each weapon, you won't get anywhere. Now, if they could fence for 30 hours a week, if we were open that much, yes, hands down, come to every single class, learn it all. I'm sure that would be good, but we haven't been in that position in years and years where that was possible. But I've got I've got at least a couple like teenage kids who are pretty good at multiple weapons, and I've got one actually assistant coach who's in his early 20s who's quite good at all 3 weapons. So I think ultimately it's really beneficial to your brain in particular to have the flexibility. It's just first 6 months to a year, especially the younger you are, I think the more challenging it is to make the adjustment. Challenge isn't a bad thing. Like if you are open to the challenge and you aren't going to get frustrated if it doesn't go well initially, I think it's probably beneficial long term. I've never experimented enough to go, okay, you're just going to do foil. You're going to do all 3 weapons. We're going to start you both at 10 and see where you are in 5 years. That'd be an interesting challenge to do, but we've never had the ability. So yeah, I think it's very much an individual thing. We mostly don't have the hours to make it super viable for people to do, but I have nothing against it. I sort of like the idea. I do all 3 weapons, so it's expensive. That's another.
Once you open a club, you're on a separate location.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan to structure your time, classes?
So we don't want to leave here because we get a whole ton of beginners from here, and it's a good spot for recreational fencing anyway. I don't know if we'll ever, because we haul 8 electric strips in here every day.
That's crazy.
Oh yeah, no, I got them all in my car right
Wow.
now. Yeah, that's 2 of them are wireless, but the other 6 are not. So it's a bunch of big
How long does
cases.
that take? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but how long does that take to set up?
If I get here at 5 and the class is at 5:30 and I'm by myself, I can usually get it in and set up in about 20 minutes. I rarely have to.
All 6?
Yeah, if I push, yeah. I rarely have to. I've usually got kids who are around and help, and so I often peel off and do other stuff. So if I've got people helping, it's obviously very quick. If I'm booking it, I can do it in 20 minutes. If I'm not, if I'm kind of moving slowly, it will take the full 30 minutes, especially because I have to bring them inside, and that, it's usually one load for most of the strips, a secondary load for like a weapon bag, and one more bit of the strips, and then sometimes a third trip to my car if I've got some other stuff. But I've got it down pretty well to a science. But yeah, I'd say about 20 to 30 minutes.
I think there's some tournament organizers that would love to have you around. It can be like half-day affairs sometimes, setting up and taking it down.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we don't have like metal strips on the floor. We're not grounding out anything. It's just floor reels, floor cords, electric boxes on chairs in there.
Okay.
Rolling out metal strips would take.
Do you use like tape as like no? You just know. This is about a strip and-
we once in a while will tape. Actually, I think we're probably due to tape it. There are some markings on a basketball court that are pretty close to the fencing ones, and so where we've got the strips, not for all of them, but for the bulk of them, like guard lines are pretty clearly marked out, and the end of the strip is not more than a foot or 2 off where it should be normally. I need to go through and measure again because it's been at least 3 or 4 years since I've done that. But they're not dramatically different, just given the dimensions that we do. Once in a while, if we've got other strips set up and we need to, like if we're trying to go above 8 strips and we've got ones in weird positions, those are not full-length strips, and so we should tape those out. We usually don't. We usually just kind of leave it up to them. Usually it's the competitive kids that go there, and they know the length of the strips. But once you've done, 2 dozen tournaments, you know exactly where you are on strip most of the time.
You touched on a lot of things I want to bring up. So you mentioned, you have the conversation with the children and then the parents about if they go competitive or not. Sometimes it's the kids choosing, sometimes it's the parents choosing, right? What are your thoughts on that dynamic?
If the kid doesn't want to do it, I don't want the kid doing it. Like, I'm not going to support it if the kid doesn't want to do it. I definitely, especially the younger kids, like their parents are often more interested than they are, but as long as they find it interesting, some of it as other people around them. I know I had at least one girl who just asked to do competitive, and I'm pretty sure it's because her 2 closest friends in the class have started doing competitive and she wants to join them. So, I mean, that's a fine motivation. I have no objection to that. And certainly her parents aren't forcing her to do it. I've had one kid that I was going to have to fire his parents essentially and tell them that they were not welcome at tournaments anymore if they couldn't keep their intensity level under control, because I wasn't comfortable having them represent the club, and they weren't being particularly polite to my coaching staff either. They removed themselves from the club before that was an issue. So I have not had to do that, but I'm willing to do that if I think a parent is pushing too hard. And I tell the parents, you pay me, but your kid's well-being is what I care about, and it's what all of us care about. None of us are going to push your kids harder than they need to be. If the kid tells me, hey, push me more, I can get kind of lazy at the club, but I need you to push me, which I have had kids do. I will more than happy to do it. And I'm also happy to have the conversation about, hey, you're not putting in the effort you need for the goals you have told me. This effort is fine if you want to back off on your goals, or we can look at an increased effort from you, especially as they get older. Again, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. That one's more, does the kid have the mental fortitude to go to a tournament and lose and be happy with that? And if the answer is yes, and their parents want to do it, then great. It's just as they get older, some of them really love it, some of them really don't. I don't mind if the parent is predominantly pushing, as long as the fencer really wants to be there. Like, that's still the key. Do they want to be there? Are they comfortable putting in the effort? The parent's not the one who has to do everything. They're not the one I have to have in class doing drills. So it doesn't really matter how invested they are. They have to be a certain amount invested to support the kid. But beyond that point, I'm not going to take somebody to a bunch of tournaments if they themselves are not super interested in going. I don't think it's particularly healthy for them either. So, yeah, it's not my job to interfere with family dynamics, but we're not going to do anything unhealthy with the kids. Certainly, if you want somebody to yell at your kids because they're losing or not doing what the coach said, this is not the club for you. I have seen coaches do that. If it works for them, I have some feelings about that. But, at the end of the day, what matters isn't that we won this tournament. What matters is that you fenced as hard as you could and you did as well as you could and you tried to learn from it and took something away from it. So I think that's a generally healthier attitude. It's probably an attitude that will get us less like high level results overall, but it will lead to hopefully more fencers and hopefully better adjusted fencers and hopefully still some, high level ones. I know in some countries when the government, is paying the clubs to find them fencers for the Olympic team, the coach's goal is to just churn through people till they find the prodigies, but that's not what we're about. I don't really think that's what most fencing in the United States is about, but that's certainly not what we're about. There are some clubs with very high level coaches whose goal is to get, national first place results and they can charge an arm and a leg for the club. And I have no objections to that as long as they don't do anything too bad to the kid's mental state. But I do think a certain level of intensity is often not good for kids. There are some exceptions. I have some wonderful fencers who are pushing themselves tremendously, had multiple fencers do like robotics intensely and fencing, and they're fretting about like making sure the tournaments all line up properly. But I every weekend they're doing something, and I think that's great. Those are wonderful people to have. But not all of our competitive fencers even want to do that. I've got some that want to do like 4 or 5 tournaments a year, and they don't really want to leave Austin or San Antonio, and which is good because you can't really get more than 4 or 5 a year if you don't leave Austin or San Antonio. We do not have a ton of tournaments in the area. A few more if you do Epee, because San Antonio has Olympian and they do 4, 5, 6 big tournaments a year that are always incredibly well attended and difficult. Good tournaments.
It does seem like Austin's had more tournaments recently.
A few more. TFA's been doing some. I actually, they hosted one regional, I think, and then AFC always does a December one. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying like I'm noticing that when I look at the tournament schedule, that more tournaments are coming. I mean, I think actually Dallas has been less tournaments than before. I think more of them are coming this way. Houston, San Antonio, Austin, we're South Texas.
Yes, Houston's has a ton. Houston has an absolute ton. Depends on what weapon you want. Space City does a whole ton of foil tournaments down there. I've attended a couple either with our foil team or some of them also do like vet foil and epee, and so I'll go and do both of those this year because I can do vet for the first time. And then Alliance is a massive epee club down there that does some tournaments, and so they've done some regional things. Houston Sword Sports does the Houston Friendlies, which are always a blast. I don't always make it down, but they're a lot of fun. They also do the Fête de Lune, which is a big veteran tournament every year. If you're a veteran, you should absolutely go. I think it's in September. Last year was my very first one. It was a lot of fun. And then San Antonio in particular does the Olympian Cup things, which are epee only, but they do 4 Olympian Cups a year, plus a Christmas one, plus a pre-summer nationals one, and they may even do another one. But that right there is 6 tournaments a year if you're an epee fencer in San Antonio. So I'd love AFC and TFA if they did more. They do some, and I think TFA is planning on doing more from things Ray has alluded to. We don't really have the bench strength of parents or staff right now to run tournaments, though it's something I would like to do eventually, even just for more of our kids to kind of get a feel for it. If we had a facility, it'd be nice to be able to run in-house ones, but we do not have the parental experience levels. COVID really did a number on like our historical strength essentially, and so we've had to start over with a lot of things. Armory has been a big challenge. In particular, because that was all our retired head coach. So Alan and Coach Jen are running it, but we don't, like, I've got some kids who are interested in learning armory, but we don't have a good spot to bring them, to bring all the armory stuff to teach them. So that's a challenge right now.
It's all the small little tools that get lost and everything.
Yeah. And, we don't really want to bring a soldering iron into the gym. So as amusing as that would be, but not a goal.
So at what point did you think, like, I know you mentioned, you decided to become a coach, but what made you do it? Like, why did you do it?
Well, so in the 90s, when I was a foil fencer for Coach Gary Murray at Round Rock, I started teaching his recreational class on Wednesdays because we had 5 nights a week of competitive foil, which is great, and he needed to focus on it on Wednesday. So I was a competitive foil fencer, but I started teaching that for him, which was fun. And even at the time, as I was going into college and going, I don't know what I want to do with my life, part of my brain went, do I want to teach fencing? And I did some math and went, no, that doesn't make sense. You can make a living doing that. So I got out ahead, but I'm a natural teacher. I like teaching people. And I've worked at a bunch of restaurants that I've wound up being the training coordinator, training manager, whatever. It's a thing I enjoy. So when I got back into fencing at Round Rock 6 years ago, 7, whenever we moved back to Round Rock, I wasn't there to coach. I was just there to fence, but I was an adult and I knew what I was doing and I'm good at teaching people. So I obviously wound up just sort of doing it accidentally. I don't know when I started identifying as a coach. It's still weird to hear coach sometimes, even though, I mean, I've been going to tournaments with these people for, whenever the first tournament after COVID was, we were there, trying to figure out how, because they weren't letting all the parents in and trying to figure all that stuff out and everything. Like I was there with them on the spot, and I've been doing it. Oh, so I feel bad for my wife because I'm gone so many weekends, but I've been doing a lot. I am a coach, but it still feels a little weird. I mean, Alan and I both have day jobs. None of us, this is nobody's full-time job. It'd be lovely if it was, if we ever got to that point, but we need a building and 5 times as many fencers. So it's a long way off from that. But, yeah, I don't, anything I do, I tend to wind up teaching in it just because I like teaching. I'm fairly good at it. So, I don't know, there was one specific moment, because even as a kid, I was teaching people at like 15. I think I had a 60-year-old in my class when I was 15 years old. So just weird telling them what to do, but you get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you grew up in Round Rock, it probably felt like a more natural transition anyway.
Oh yeah,
eventually, right?
It's the club I've come back to. Yeah, I've done a few clubs up in Dallas, and mostly just in Dallas. There was a small epee only club that was pretty recreational that I fenced at for a while when I sort of got back into it. And I moved to Oklahoma for a couple of years for work, and I got over to City of Thunder like once, or Redlands. I think it was Redlands at the time, maybe twice.
Jerry,
and
that's Jerry, right? Jerry Benson, that's his. Redlands, is that his?
So they've merged recently, and I cannot remember. I met him recently, and I've got his name in my email. I can dig it up, but I genuinely do not remember the name of his last name begins with an R. Whoever owns City Thunder right now, it begins with an R. I think he's a veteran age, but he still mostly just does Div 1 tournaments, not veteran. He's quite good. He's a lot better than I am. They seem like they're mostly epee only now, though I think they were all 3 weapons at one point in time. But yeah, Round Rock's where I started. Round Rock's where I am right now. Once in a while, I'll go down to Austin Fencers Club and do some open bouting there, just because I don't get as much open bouting in here because I'm teaching. Even when I'm on strip with somebody, it's to teach them something. Once in a while I'll fence about just trying to win it, but not 99% of the time. It's always about teaching them something or doing a different style so they get used to it. And so once in a while I'll go down there, even though I've got 4 or 5 fencers down there every time I go in. But it's still, it lets me be separate from all of this. So it's nice to do. And I've got a good relationship with Eric and Ben and Blake down there, and Tom. I think they have one more coach, and I don't remember their name, and I feel bad for that. So
So how many days are you guys open here?
4.
Four.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We do Saber and beginners Monday, Wednesday. We have Coach Chris to run Saber, Coach Jen to run beginners, and then I'm there for admin to back one of them up because one or both of them may have family commitments or work commitments, and then I'll do lessons with some of the Saber kids, or once in a while I'll have people come in and do lessons. And then Tuesday, Thursday is foil and epee. I tend to run epee. Coach Gabriel has been running foil, and Coach Allen's jumping over there a lot to get him kind of caught up to modern, and he also does some armory work during that time for anything that goes down during the day, which is more stuff than I would like. But
do you think about hosting tournaments, or do you already host tournaments?
Hosting? I'd love to. We don't. So this facility, I don't know that we could rent it out in an affordable fashion. We might be able to. I don't know. They don't give us a discount just because we're vendors here or anything. The biggest problem is just that, like AFC, I think they've got, AFC is a nonprofit. I think Texas Fencing Academy is a nonprofit. And so they've got board members and a lot of parents that are involved. We have plenty that would volunteer. We haven't done it in years. I actually wonder the last tournament we hosted was. It might be like mid 2000s. It was after I went off to college because I think we hosted the Adelman Open. I know we did the Summer Nationals in 02.
You hosted the Edelman? Is it Adelman? Edelman. I thought it was Edelman. We always pronounce it Edelman.
I don't know. I thought it was Adelman, but I was 17 at the time. Who knows? I'm not good with names to begin with, so I'm glad I have my whole epee class because that took some doing, learning a whole class's names and then learning to keep updating it in my head. So I don't know when Coach Murray stopped hosting tournaments. We did Summer Nationals in 2000 with AFC, and I think it was just us in 2002, but AFC might have been involved there as well. So I'd love to do it. If we do it, it'll probably be when we get a facility and we start with just an in-house tournament to like fencers who don't normally do tournaments. Here's what they're like. And that's how we'll start teaching parents. I don't know that we have any certified refs at the moment. I should probably do a ref test and get it on file because it's been decades since I haven't. I think it's dropped off. I don't enjoy being a ref at tournaments at all, so my goal is not to do it. I sent, I think, 5 or 6 people down to the last referee clinic South Texas Division did, and I'm hoping a couple of them might want to, but we'll see. So, kind of building up that bench strength will be necessary too before we host real ones. More likely than that, if we get a facility, we'll do some in-house ones. And then we've got a really good relationship with Mustang and Coach Tim, and he's an FA only club. And so we'll probably get some of them in and do like a Round Rock Mustang tournament. And then maybe we'll start doing some official sanctioned ones after that point. But we've got a while to grow before we get there, I think. So.
Okay.
I'd love to, though. It would be fun.
So looking back on your actual fencing career when you're competing, is there anything you would have done differently? Now being like, now I'm a coach, should I have done something different then?
I didn't. Or is it? I didn't push myself particularly hard as a kid, and I wish I'd kept up with it in college because it I think would have highlighted, because I was always able to, especially as a kid, be at least somewhat smarter than my opponents. I had a good tactical mind in foil at the time. Amusingly, I feel like I've lost a little bit sometimes, not always, but sometimes. But I never was the physical, I was not an athlete in any way, shape, or form. So being more of an athlete, doing it in college would have helped a lot with that. I am glad I did it competitively because I had to do debate or fencing, and was like, well, I'm not going to exercise otherwise, but I am going to argue with people. So we probably don't need to do debate competitively. Let's do fencing. I had some fencers at the time, actually, that were in debate with me as well. One of them is a year older than I am. I think he did debate the year before. Actually, I think teaches HEMA in Austin now. I ran into him for the first time in 20-some-odd years. That was very strange. I didn't even know he was still around. But yeah, taking it more seriously. It's not that everybody needs to take it seriously. I just wish I had. I would be a much better fencer today if I had taken it more seriously as a kid, if I had been in shape, if I never stopped fencing. A lot of people do. I know U.S. fencing is trying to recapture a lot of they graduate college and they stop fencing. And I'd love to recapture some myself, but I also, I think for the sport it would be better. I know they're talking about a 18 to 29 age category. We'll see when that happens. But, I think based on some stuff I saw that you actually can do it in the new fencing season. I think you can do a tournament in that age category.
Oh, cool.
I don't think they'll do it at a national or even regional level, but I do believe it is a sanctioned age category now. If it's not, it's about to be, and it's like developmental type, not developmental, but similar to how they did Y8 for a year. But yeah, they are very seriously talking about it.
I think it'll work. Why? Wait, hold on, because I have my own thoughts about this. Why yes and why no?
Do I think 18 to 39 age
or trying to recapture?
I hope and want the recapture to work. However that winds up looking, I want it to. And a lot of the fencing in the country is really focused at the college thing, which is funny because they're fighting for so few spots. Like fencing looks great on your college application because it's a weird thing that looks good. Yeah. I think it's great to get into schools as a, hey, look, I'm a unique candidate. As far as getting recruited by a school, it is so difficult to do. I have had one fencer that got recruited to one Division III NCAA school, but he was driving to Houston every weekend for lessons. He was fencing 4, 5, 6 days a week. Like I told him flat out that it was what we were doing was not going to be enough. I'm pretty sure that was me and not Coach Murray. If it wasn't me, it was Coach Murray. But either way, it's very, very true. So I think less of a focus on getting into schools would be nice. I don't know if it will succeed at the recapture or not. I am sort of, part of me thinks it's just going to be the Division I fencers that are already at a high level that just continue to do that and nobody else. Maybe if it was Division II or III, 18 to 39, I genuinely don't know if it will work. My own trajectory was very strange, so I don't know, like for your average fencer, how you would keep them in the sport necessarily, but I would love to see it happen somehow. I'm all for more accessibility to the sport. And the U.S. Fencing was talking about doing, I got an email actually, but I haven't looked it over. I think my other owner did, about them wanting to do a program to get clubs beginner equipment more easily and things like that. That came in the other day, which would be great. I mean, we got good relationships with some of the fencers for ordering gear through, but but it's one of the big hurdles to the sport. And I'd love if there were easier ways for new fencers to get equipment. And that same thing for, semi-competitive fencers post-college starting their careers out. It was not prohibitively expensive for them. A lot of the fencers I run into at, especially veteran tournaments are, doctors and dentists and lawyers and people who have a significant amount of disposable income, and they can do 4, 5, 6 national tournaments every year. That's probably an exaggeration, but they can do a lot of that stuff. So I don't know what the answer is, but I definitely want it to happen.
Yeah, it's
right after I can't fence it, of course. But
okay. Let me ask the question this way, and you touched on it. And actually, I'm sure, I think we share some of the same views on this. So, what percentage of fencers, fencing families, are involved for the sport primarily for university?
Ooh, I don't know.
Now, okay, we could take the greater fencing membership, or we could talk about the people who are actively going to tournaments, like national.
I was going to say,
right?
certainly the most visible fencers are all heavily involved in that. A lot of tournament goers, that is at least partially a focus. Though I think once you've done a couple years of tournaments, you sort of understand that if you are not willing to make it a full-time job for your kid,
right,
it is unlikely to get recruited into the, especially Division I NCAA's type stuff. Being a walk-on or maybe getting recruited to one of the schools that can't pay, Division III type stuff. That's more doable. Not easy to do, but more doable. But I think to start out, a lot of parents in particular have that viewpoint. I try to make not my opinion on that. I try to make the realities very clear when we have that conversation about what competitive means and so forth, that this is not a funnel into NCAA, that this is not like a natural progression for it. If your kid's a prodigy, maybe, but in general, this may help you get into a school, but it's not going to get you recruited into a school. It's not going to give you a full ride or anything like that. If you get any money at all for fencing, I would be surprised. On a competitive level, I would say the number is high. I don't know what percentage. Certainly starting out, probably 70 or 80%. I also don't know what kind of promises some clubs make people. And I also don't know what promises some clubs are actually able to keep with people. Because I always compare myself to places like Alliance and Olympian that have really high level, whether former NCAA coaches or former, world-class competitors. But there are a lot of fencing clubs out there that aren't like that, even ones that go to tournaments that aren't like that. And then there are many more fencing clubs that are purely recreational. So it gives me a skewed view of the fencing landscape sometimes, seeing us always as the underdog. But I hear about clubs with like 20 or 30 people that never do tournaments. Like, okay, I guess we're not the underdogs that much. We're just, we are when we go to tournaments, essentially. So especially like national level stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It's a higher percentage than it should be, I'll tell you that. I mean, I think it's really good for kids' development. Like, you will be like both having the intestinal fortitude to stand on strip with another person with a weapon who's trying to beat you. That level of I'm just putting myself up against another person and we're going to see who's better. Not the better fencer overall, just the better fencer now in this bout. One of us might be a different better fencer tomorrow, but right now, learning who the better one is and really trying just gives you this mental flexibility that is incredibly valuable. Both the mental flexibility and the self-confidence and the athleticism for a lot of these kids who are, especially like myself, somewhat nerdier, isn't a natural fit. So I think it's really good for them to get that angle as well.
Okay, so all that being said, compared to other sports,
mm-hmm.
are the chances higher going the fencing way or not going the fencing way?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I would have to look at some math for that. I think that depends on what you mean. I suspect most people getting into, say, football in Texas are not planning on having it be the career route because they sort of know that requires an extremely high level of commitment. But certainly more fencers are going to get recruited to an NCAA school than more football players because there are a lot more football players.
From a ratio perspective.
But that's just because, every college, every high school in Texas has a football team and most of the kids on it are not trying to get into it. So every kid that's trying to get recruited, that's a better question. I don't know about the ratios there. That would be interesting to see. I am not super well tapped into the other sports, so that sort of makes it difficult to determine. But I'd be curious to see whether it was better or worse for that. Not good statistically either way, I think. But pinning your hopes on sport performance for your kid is not I think the way to make sure that they have enough money for school. Like if it works, great, but maybe don't
Oh, you talking about okay? So you talking about scholarship, or are you talking about just help you get in? That's what I'm talking about. Like
getting in, helping you getting into a school, or getting into a school and then competing for that school. Because those are like, I do think that having fencing on my resume helped me get into a college, even though there was no expectation that I would fence for the school. I didn't tell them that I would.
Let's say a school with a fencing team, despite the size of it.
I mean, a school with a fencing club, but the clubs generally have no say in the application process,
right.
And so there's no glory for the school. It just makes you look like a well-rounded person. So I think it definitely helps a lot there, and I think it certainly helps more than say football because you're going to stand out more.
Sure.
I'm not an expert on college application process. It's certainly not on modern college applications. It's been years since I've done it, and I don't currently have anybody. I don't have any kids that are going through it, so I don't know what they say the best things are right now. But I think it's going to stand out more than football to people who know nothing about fencing, who are just like, "Ooh, that's a cool thing," like that. To that, I think it is beneficial. As far as getting recruited, like even if it's just, hey, we've got a team, this kid looks like he might be good on it, maybe we should get him, like that. That I don't know how common that is. And that partially just because I don't know how tapped into fencing the recruiters are, but there are not a lot of schools who do it at anything beyond an intramural level. And there's intramural stuff is great. SWIFA, Southwest Intercollegiate Fencing Association, between Texas State and UT and A&M, like they have some good fencers. They have some good tournaments. They actually host a bunch recently. San Marcos, Texas State has been doing a bunch. And I think the Longhorn Open at UT is going to happen again this fall, I hear, which would be awesome. Actually, I'm borrowing a UT student to help me coach Saber right now, Coach Kevin, who's been tremendously helpful. And so that sort of thing is excellent. But I don't believe that anybody at UT got let in so that they could fence on the team and help the team win. Right. I do think it was like, oh, hey, this kid's a fencer. Well, that's interesting. This one's boring. This one's not. They're even if otherwise. Like, that's what they always said. Make sure your application stands out. I don't know to what extent that's true anymore, but I feel like it helps. Also, fencing gives you mental agility. Most of these kids are smart. Pretty much all of the kids we've ever had eventually, I think it really does help your brain grow and develop if you started early enough. I have no proof of that, but it feels that way. So a lot of them tend to get in on their own merits anyway. So,
in your opinion, what personal qualities can help a child, person, whoever, to become Olympian in any sport?
Olympian? I mean, I've met some Olympians, but I have never personally developed someone to become an Olympian. I mean, as with most other highest level of achievement type things, you have to have the dedication and discipline to do it for 40 or 50 hours a week. Like, if you don't have the parental backing and the personal fortitude and drive to spend the vast majority of your time doing it, you will not succeed, because that's what everybody who's trying to do it does. I mean, even writing a book, you don't have to be great at writing a book. You just have to sit down for 5, 6, 7 hours a day and write, and you will start cranking things out. I think Mark Twain said that, what is it? Mark Twain, 98% perspiration, 2% inspiration, or something like that. Most of it is just, do you have the ability to put your nose to the grindstone and do it? And I don't. Like, I would not have done that as a kid. I wish I had more focus, but I don't know that I am interested in dedicating my life to just my own personal athletic achievement in any way to go to the highest level in something. But there's a lot of things that will be helpful. There's a lot of things that you need. Having an intellectual approach can be useful, but if you're not willing to put in the time, then there's nothing else for it. Like, that's the first priority. The first thing, if you can't do that, then in most of the competitive things, whether it is, writing a book, which is competitive because you're competing against all the other authors out there, or going to the Olympics, everyone else is doing it as much as they humanly can at the highest level. So if you can't or won't, you will not get there. You may not know that's where you want to end up. You may not start that way. You may go, oh, I am good at this. What do I need to do? And the next step is always do it more. Just do it more. So, which is one of the reasons we are still a recreational club, even though we have 20 or 30 competitive fencers, is because we have 8 hours a week. And so doing it more is not an option. I mean, I send some of them to other clubs, get more practice, heck, take lessons outside of the club. We don't have a really good facility for one-on-ones. I go to people's houses occasionally. I'll do some one-on-ones on Saber nights here. And we do a lot of mini one-on-ones during classes. But, in an ideal situation, all my competitive kids would take like 2 30-minute private lessons a week from somebody, but we don't have that option. So, or at least not easily and smoothly. So only the most dedicated ones do that sort of thing.
So basically, most what you need to do, just come persistently, and the coach will lead you. If you have a good coach, they will guide you to the right things, because you can do persistently same thing but wrong.
I mean, coaching helps. Coaching is 10 to 15 to 20%. That's very true. A lot of it, the more you do it, you will there are always going to be eureka moment. I mean, you've both been. I actually don't know what your fencing background is, how long you've done, but fencing development is very spiky. You kind of coast for a while, and then you figure something out, and you get much, much better, and then you coast there for a while, and then you kind of slump for a bit, or you're learning a thing but you're not doing it right, you slump, and then eventually you figure it out. But it's not like it's gradual development, right. And some of that is coaching, and some of that is just experience. If you don't have the dedication, even with a good coach, you're probably not going to get there. If you do have the dedication and the time and the money, so when you're talking about very high level stuff, even with a bad coach, you'll probably eventually get there. Having a good coach really helps smooth the process and might help you identify that you can do it and get you much better much sooner. The coaching piece is really important, especially if the kids are trying to get into school, because there's not a big window, and that's always a challenge. If I've got a kid who's 17 who's about to go off to college and he's trying to be a better fencer, a lot of it's going to depend on what his goals are, because I tend to coach with a view towards the future. I coach very holistically. What will make you a better fencer, not necessarily what will make you win this tournament that you're at right now. And sometimes the focus needs to be pulled back on okay, what's going to make you a better fencer tomorrow? I only got you for 6 more months. What can I do? Whereas really, it's going to be a 4-year process to get him where I want to be. I'm going to start that process now, but he's not going to be there to finish it. Do I start it? Usually yes, but I'll have a conversation with them about here's a bad habit you're doing that is working well at tournaments now, because you're not running into people who can stop you. The moment they can stop you, you're just going to lose. We need to break the habit. We can't break the habit in 6 months. Do you want to start breaking the habit, or you just want to double down on being as good at that one weird trick as you can, win as much as you can, and then go off to college and figure out what you want to do then? Usually we try to temper it a little bit, but the coaching is important, but if the fencer, and the coaching can help give the fencer drive, but the fencer does have to have that drive.
Some fencers, they go to have lessons from different coaches with different styles.
Yes, I would encourage that, generally speaking. It sort of depends on the fencer. Some kids are very authority based, and so if they have 3 people telling them 3 different things, they are not good at dealing with that. And so that's a problem. But I've got many others who are very, actually myself, I am very synthesis based. I steal every coaching seminar I've ever been to, every lesson I've ever had, every conversation with another coach I've had. I steal every little bit of things. I mostly teach a French style of epee, not French pommeling, but a French style, because I've had some lessons with Maestro Vandro out in Albuquerque. He used to be Brazilian national team head coach, I think, and he's got a very French style. His master comes from when he got his mastery in fencing, it was in France. I do not fence that way. I'm really bad at fencing that way. I'm trying to be better at it, because they run into a lot of that in Texas. But I'm much better at some other weirder styles. But yeah, fencers who are good at synthesis, I would always encourage to take as many lessons from as many different coaches as you can. You'll learn so much. If you take anything you're told as gospel truth, maybe don't do that, because that will just lead you to confusing yourself, because they'll all tell you different things. And in coaching, every time you tell somebody something, you're lying to them a little bit. You teach a beginner, it's okay, good. Always extend before you attack. Good. Anytime you take a parry, always riposte. It's parry riposte. It's one word, parry riposte. Well, that's not always true, but you lie to them at the beginning so they get the reflexes down. Okay, here's where it's different. But every time you tell them, okay, here's what you do in this situation, there's always a except. And as they get better, you tell them more of those excepts. And here's what you do there, except when this happens. Okay, but what about when so the ones who just slavishly do everything their coaches said, I think work less well with multiple coaches. But though I'd love to get kids like that to work better with them, but it's not always a good fit for some people. But I think for, at least for me, it's great to get as many lessons as you can with many different people. If I had the money, I'd go to every coaching seminar I could every year.
What so you mentioned people are on certain timelines, right? 17-year-old, whatever. So it's kind of coming from 2 angles question. One question is, what do you call beginner, intermediate, high level? You mentioned this a few times, the different levels. And then the other question I have is, what, the different age groups? You should be at what level by a certain age group based on what goal?
Oh, I mean, I don't have a slavish one for that. And part of it is because I haven't had to, because we can't divide our classes up really. So I haven't had to come up with a determination of what is competitive versus intermediate, or what's intermediate versus advanced. So we haven't been forced to do that. And a lot of it, it depends on your age. I had a coach send me recently a like 8-week breakdown. What does he expect after 8 weeks? And I'm looking at it and going, he teaches college almost exclusively, because by the end of 8 weeks, he's talking about second intention and things like that. And it's like, I cannot talk about second intention in their first 8 weeks of fencing with a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Maybe some coaches can. Like, every coach has different strength. I know personally I cannot get them there, like, mentally to discuss that sort of tactical thing. I could maybe get them to sort of experience it on strip, but I can't. I'm certainly not on an intellectual level. I can't get somebody like that.
It also depends on the kid too, right?
Yes.
Kids at that age are all over the place.
Oh yeah, I've
Right,
had
so
because we used to be 8 and up. I think we're 7 and up now. But I remember when I was a kid, we had like a 7-year-old who coach was like, "Oh no, he's fine," and he was better than most of the 9 or 10-year-olds we have. And then I've met 11 or 12-year-olds. It's like, I'm not really sure they should be fencing yet. Like, I don't know that I trust them with a sword, and their coordination is not really where it needs to be. But you as long as they can stay safe, that's the one requirement for the class is can I trust you to have a weapon with my back turned for a split second? But yeah, all of that. Like, if I had to divide the classes up, I'd have a more rigorous breakdown, and I can kind of come up with things. But it depends on when you start, depends on what your goals are, and depends on how much time you're willing to put into it. And to some extent, it also depends on your natural, inclinations as well.
is there an age is too young to fence, and is there an age is too late to start fencing if your goal is college?
It's never too late to start fencing.
With college as the goal.
I mean, to what extent? Like getting recruited by NCAA?
Sure.
At that point, yeah, I'm sure there's an age that's too late to start. That probably depends on how many hours and how much traveling you want to put into it. If you were like a super athletic person, especially in epee where I feel like, and I've been told by coaches that foil and saber take longer to get a basic competitive competency. I'm not 100% sure that that's true, but certainly the ones that I'm talking about are coaches at a national level who indicate that. And based on how modern epee is versus the other one, like if you're a great athletic person in amazing shape, a good coach with 40 hours a week with you at various different places and sparring and open fencing and so forth could probably get you to a very high NCAA level in just a year or two of epee if you're already amazingly athletic and really intelligent and willing to make it your entire junior and senior year. How many people meet that criteria? But I bet that could be done, and it might even be able to be done in foil or saber, but so few people are already that purely athletic and willing to spend that level of time on something that might not work, that they haven't been in their whole life, that I can't imagine that happening. If somebody has that goal, I'll be realistic, but we're like realistically, they can't get to it just with us anyway, unless they are, I think I've heard Ray Parker say God's gift to fencing, if they were one of a true prodigy, maybe, but even that's unlikely. Too young for fencing. Too young for fencing, I think, really depends on how direct your coaching is. Like if I had a kid, like personally, like if I had a child and they were old enough to pick up the weapon, I would be comfortable teaching them at whatever age they were, because it's one-on-one. There's not the safety concern. As long as they're able to hold the weapon, there's not the physical concern. I'm not great with like the 5 to 6 year old kid range, and certainly steel weapons, especially in a group class, I think that's almost certainly too young. One-on-one, you can teach them much younger than you can in a group setting, and the bigger the group setting, the harder it is, the younger they are. Yeah. Because we are so group focused, even the 7 to 8 year olds sometimes struggle more than I would want them to, because we just don't. Like in an ideal world, I'd have one coach to every like 4 8 year old, but we don't have those sorts of numbers. So that one's very much a question of how focused can the coaching be. I'd love to, any age you want, I'd love to, assign you a coach, but we can't obviously do that. Most clubs can't do that. So easier if you have a youth class, but even then, how big can your youth class be versus how many coaches you have before it is unsafe? And that some of that depends on the age category as well. So.
Do you have any what's your most memorable moment as a competitor and as a coach?
Let's see. As a competitor, I have very clear moments of when I took a level up in foil. As a kid, just something clicked at tournament. I was down 13-6 or 12-6 and won the bout 15-13. got my D, and then lost to actually our current division chair, Oscar Barrera, back when he was in South Texas, back when he was fencing foil still. So this must have been early 2000s. He beat me 15-13, which is why I didn't get a C in foil before I went off to college, because that would have gotten me my C if I'd gotten 2 more points on him. I don't remember the bout, but I remember the score. So that as a competitor has always just stuck out in my head. I have much clearer, more recent memories of doing well. I won a vet foil event down in Houston, and then had to go fence Div 2 Epee immediately. Like, they had to hold some of my bouts for me. Got on strip, swept my whole pool. Only person at the tournament in Div 2 Epee swept their whole pool. Immediately lost to the 32nd seed because I had 0 energy left, and he was a very defensive fencer, and I just could not push. I tried to people hack him out. Like, we were tied, and I knew I was ahead of him on the standings going into the tournament, and he got a lucky hit, and I couldn't do it. And we went to time, and he got a hit on my leg, and so I lost 12-11 to the number 32 seed at a tournament. I swept the pool. So that was memorable for a few reasons. As a coach, there've been a couple. I've had a couple compliments from parents from other clubs that they like how I coach. That was pleasant because I'm very supportive. And so I can remember a few of those, and those are always nice. Certainly, a number of things that stand out are individual fencers unexpectedly beating people they weren't expected to, coaching somebody through a DE that they were like, well, I'm never going to win this, and then beating somebody they've never beaten before. That's happened at least once very recently that I remember. If they're watching, they'll know who I'm talking about. I've had a few of those over time, and those stand out. Those are nice. At the end of the day, I think the bigger thing for me is just looking at a fencer on strip and thinking about where they were 6 months ago or a year ago and seeing the change. And that's where I tend to be satisfied. I'm not a goal-oriented person. I never have I want to win this tournament, or I want to be this. I want to get better. I want to get everyone better. I'm very skill focused. I am satisfied by becoming a better fencer. I am satisfied when I make people better fencers. And I do not care if they lose the tournament and get 0 touches. If they fenced better than they did at the last one, that is all I care about. If you fence worse than you did at the last one and you win the whole thing, I mean, good, I'll celebrate it, but that's not where my interest lies. My interest lies in making you a better person and a better fencer. And similarly, I don't, they're always going to be better fencers than me. I don't have the time, dedication, energy, and I'm not a natural athlete. And even if everybody around me is getting better too, as long as I am improving, that's what I care about as a coach and as a fencer. It's weird that I'm not a competitive coach. I am a skill-focused coach. That's what I like. I like teaching people better skills. I like getting better skills. That's always been my focus. And those are the most satisfying things when I see kids really just be much better as people and have grown as fencers tremendously. Those are the times that really stand out.
But those skills improvements should be reflected with their results on.
They can be. It helps. It is not, and even for myself, it is nice to see my tournament results improve because it does mean I'm generally getting better faster than the people around me. And so that is pleasant and a nice affirmation. But everybody around you is always trying to get better. If your tournament results don't change, that means you're getting better. It just means so's everybody else. When they start slipping, that might mean you're not actually getting better. But if your tournament results, if you're consistently fencing the same group of people and doing the same, it is very unlikely that you are not getting better, because it's very unlikely that nobody is getting better. Much more often, everybody is getting better. And the question is just, am I keeping pace? Am I getting better faster? Am I getting better more slowly? And it's about aggregate over time. Fencing development is very spiky. I've had people win bouts and tournaments against people that were on paper much, much better than they are because they figured them out that day. And then the next tournament, the other person had adjusted and they gone back to get their butt kicked. But on that day, they were the better fencer. And that does show development and growth. It's not permanent, but it does show development. But yes, tournament results are nice because they do demonstrate that you are getting better and getting better faster than the other people around you. So it's a nice affirmation, but it's not. If I get somebody the gold medal bout of, let's say, a regional level event, which is, regionals are not particularly easy. They're not like they were when I was a kid. Regionals are very difficult nowadays. But I've gotten people a gold medal bout. And I think we've had a couple of kids win some regional events pretty sure. Not more than a couple, because regionals are tough nowadays. If they get to the gold medal bout, I will probably be more laid back than anybody else about it. My blood will be up. I want them to win. I want them to win for them. I want them to win because it's satisfying. But the fact that they had to push themselves and be so much better to get to that point, especially if that's not a thing they were expecting coming into it. If they were like barely hoping for a top 8 finish, and even that was unusual, and they get all the way up there, they were a better fencer than normal that day. Their skills have improved. I'm already happy. Like, win, lose, obviously I'd be happier if they win. Not good for my blood pressure sometimes, especially if they take it to like 14-14. Oof. But honestly, half my anxiety at 14-14 is just for the parents, for the fencer, because I know they'll feel terrible if they lose. But man, you make it to 14-14 in a tournament and it's the gold medal bout, you should be happy, win or lose. Like, I will be anxious, but it's for them. I'm anxious for them because I don't want it to destroy them. But it never, like, I've lost many close bouts and it never hurts me. What hurts me is not fencing well. If I feel like I fenced well, I will have I'll have a miserable day. Even if I win the whole tournament, I was just fencing very badly, which has happened before. That's not a good feeling for me personally. And if I have a good day and I fence really well and I got 5-0'd by like 4 people, I don't care. Like, I fenced well. I did better than I was expecting to, or I did the right things on strip. Sometimes, I do the right things. I'm just not doing them at the right time or the right speed because I'm carrying an extra 50 pounds and I'm 20 years older than they are. And some of it's, if I'm trying to win, I should either stop doing those things or do what I'm doing, which is to continue to do those until I'm actually capable of doing them at the right speed. And that's sort of a personal choice about to what extent you want competitions to be training. I tend to view competitions as training, especially for your first couple years of fencing, but even for myself, like, you go to a tournament to compete, to get better, to learn. And so sometimes I'll do things that maybe aren't optimal because they will eventually be optimal, and I want to get more practice doing them at events instead of my goal being to win this whole thing. I mean, I switched to pistol grip for épée only a couple of years ago. I was on French. I could do some, not pummeling, like French classic grip, choked up all the way. I could do some weird things with that surprised the heck out of people. I've won so many bouts because I did a strange, like, circle 6 with a weird angulated riposte that nobody was expecting, or a deep 5 with a riposte to the head. And I swear I cannot get the riposte anymore with a pistol grip. But just surprised the heck out of people. But it wasn't winning against the very best people, and so I swapped. And even though I would most of my tournament results probably have been better this year if I hadn't swapped, but in the long run, I will be better. And so I swapped even for tournaments. But I won't necessarily make my kids do that. Like, I make it clear to them, okay, this is the best thing for your long-term fencing, but for today, this is what's been working well. So let's maybe go with this, unless you want, and sometimes it depends on the tournament, what their goals are. Sometimes their goal is just to get better, and sometimes their goal is to win. And we always have the pre-tournament chat. What's your goal today? What are you working on? What are you trying to do? Because it's different for everybody. In an ideal world, club fencing in particular, every single bout is just about learning. You don't care about winning a bout. Every single bout of club fencing is just about learning. Nobody has the mental endurance for that. You want to win sometimes. If you can do half your bouts to learn something and half your bouts to win, that's great. That's a great split, and I think that's better than most people get. I can do more than that because I have to coach them most of the time. But if my kids are spending half of their bouts just working on skills, I would be overjoyed.
What is one thing? Is there one thing you would change about fencing if you could?
I mean, I'd love to make it cheaper.
Oh yeah,
that's not a. Are you talking about like rule changes or wave of magic? I mean, wave of magic wand is more cheaper tournaments, more accessibility, more people doing the sport. Those are all just sort of, obviously everyone wants
sure.
that.
The form, function, process, all that's great.
I say I'm not like I go to our division meetings. I pay attention to U.S. fencing as a whole. I'm not sufficiently tapped in to feel like I have super strong opinions about that. There's some people whose opinions are well thought out and respected that I tend to, at least one board member is pretty transparent about things. I tend to read like, oh, that makes sense, but I don't have a ton of strong opinions there. I'm not the wildest fan of the march in saber or foil. I can teach it. I can do it. I feel like attack and prep is a thing that'd be nice if it came back a little bit more. I know there's been a push to change saber timings back, and I would be very interested to see how that goes because it feels like it might make attack and prep more of a thing. So that'd be nice. It would also make it a little bit easier to explain to people watching because most people watching foil or saber have no idea what's going on. They also don't necessarily have an idea what's going on with épée either, and épée is a little more boring to watch. I'd love to figure out a way to make it more interesting as a sport to watch. We don't have a lot of commentators at a high level. This is something I always think about, like, I should just commentate it. It's like, oh, yeah, I don't know how to do sports commentary. But that would be something that'd be nice just to get more people into the sport. I don't want it necessarily to be like football where it's this big thing. I want there to be more of it. It should, more of anything tends to be good. More fencing would be wonderful. There's lots of there's some organization of people really fighting with refs out in California that I know nothing about, but I'm on some of the Facebook and Reddit groups, so I see the fights. Like, there's always drama in the community that I very much stay out of. As with all sporting behavior, I wish people were more respectful of other people. It's not a huge problem locally. I do not tend to see at local or regional tournaments a lot of people being abusive with the referees or with the fencers. I see it once in a while, but it's not a problem I see a ton. I do hear about it happening, and I may also be kind of oblivious to it. That's equally possible, but I certainly hear it happening at other venues and other fencing things. So if that does happen on a regular basis, I would want everyone to treat everyone else like a human being. I make that clear to parents that everyone going to a tournament is a human being, parents, coaches, whatever, and I expect you to treat everyone with respect. And with one exception, I've never had a problem with it. I don't know if Coach Murray did. He'd been coaching for a lot longer than I have. But if we have, it has not been much. Setting the expectations early is kind of nice for that. So yeah, I don't know if I have any other magics changes or switches that I would say. Easier, like more support from U.S. fencing for like recreational clubs in particular would be nice. A lot of stuff especially since we're building the club up because there's more than one, owner / coach. And so there's Gary Murray did a wonderful job for many, many years and so forth, but he's only one human being. And as we're growing it more, there's not a lot of we're having to figure everything out on our own, and so there's not a lot of I wish there was somebody at US that I just email for here's just a random business question about how clubs work. How do most clubs do this? How do most clubs pay their assistant coaches? Just simple questions like that. That would be lovely if there was more support. And this doesn't mean US fencing is doing a bad job. They may or may not. I'm not tapped in. I don't know what resources they have. I'm not a judgmental person. I don't want to judge somebody else. I would like more support. Doesn't mean they're not giving me all the support they can be. They might be, but I would enjoy more. So it'd make life easier. I'm sure y'all as a new club would also love some more support there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. We're happy to, take any support we can get. I think any club out there.
Oh,
right?
To all our conversation, maybe not logical question in this present moment. Fencing is a very emotional sport. It sounds like your main goal, become a better person, become more skilled, better than yesterday. How do you manage your emotions? How do you separate them while you fence? Sounds like you're really good at it.
Yeah, so I'm not the most emotional fencer, which is always a challenge dealing with students who are, ones who break down in tears after bouts. I started when I was 10. I started doing competitions 11. I don't think I've ever cried after a bout. And if my parents ever see this and I find out I'm wrong, feel free to tell me, Mom and Dad. But I genuinely don't have any memory of that. So that's always a bit of a challenge for me. I've dealt with it. I know how to validate feelings. I've talked to a lot of coaches about how you deal with that. I do. On strip, I'm not perfect. I definitely get in my own head about things. I've lost 5-0 to a college fencer who'd been fencing for 6 months because they just kept closing the infighting distance. And I know I'm a better fencer than they are because it's very obvious. And I just keep, even though they're clearly good at infighting, and I couldn't, I always stop them, but I couldn't quite hit the riposte. And then they just kind of brute force stabbed me. And I just lost 5-0 because I got my brain fixed on, I'm a better fencer. And it was pride essentially take over. I fenced in the D the next day and beat them 15-6 because I just stayed out of their distance and actually fenced with a brain. So sometimes I do get a little frustrated on strip with myself. It doesn't. Mostly, it just comes. It comes about. I make bad tactical choices sometimes. I get fixed on a line, and I don't think about the other things I could be doing. That's usually my biggest problem. And it's vaguely emotional, but it's I wouldn't tie it to a pure emotion, but it's certainly not a logical or rational response to things. But that's my personal biggest challenge. In general, no, I'm not the most I don't tend to get devastated by things. It's a sport. We're doing it for fun. Yes, some people are trying to get into schools, but at the end of the day, we're not if everyone was trying to get into school, there'd be no fencing after college, and there'd be much fewer fencing before college because you wouldn't do it unless you had the money and the resources to push yourself that much. It should be fun. If it's not fun, why are we doing this? With that said, it's okay to be emotionally devastated by a loss as long as in general you're having fun. But I don't want people who are just I don't think it's good for people who are miserable at fencing to just keep fencing. Unless you like being miserable or you're less miserable doing it than anything else. There are exceptions, obviously. yeah, dealing with it. I did. Everybody always recommends literature, and I occasionally hear Sun Tzu's The Art of War for fencing, which I don't think is a particularly good idea for fencing. I don't think it's particularly relevant. And I haven't read this in years, but the Book of Five Rings by, I think, Musashi, one of the great Japanese duelists of all times, not a particularly good human being, but really good duelist, won a whole ton of duels in his life, many of them to the death, wrote a book, and it's pretty much just on like the 5 emotional states you can be in during a duel. And I found that very, very useful for fencing, and I'd highly recommend that to everyone, because he obviously thought that one was better, which is the one where you're not emotional at all. But he talked about the one where you're angry, the one where things like that, and how to deal with that, how to use it to win, because if you can't get out of it, you might as well have to use it, and so forth. So it was an interesting book. I have not read it in decades, but I would love to go back to it, because I have recommended it to a couple kids, because it's I don't know about emotional regulation, but it's good to at least make you aware of what your emotions are doing, which I think the more important thing.
Okay. All right. I think we're only down to a couple questions left. Let me see here. Is there anyone you'd like to recognize in the sport?
Let's see. I mean, all of the coaches that we've had at the club, and in no particular order, I'm just going to go. Let's see, Julia, Edward, everybody who helped us out with our summer camps this year. Coach Jen, Coach Allen, Coach Chris, Coach Michael, Coach Gabriel, Coach Kevin, Coach Clayton, who moved to New York, but he was tremendously useful for a while when we had him. Coach Gary Murray, our retired head coach. Let's see, people in the sport in particular. Pooj, who's long since passed, but Pooj was a great contributor to Central Texas fencing and really got it started to a large extent. I think Coach Murray blames Pooj for getting, in a good way, for getting a lot of it going. We've got a memorial for him and his father every year, which is nice that it's been back. Oscar Barrera for having run this division for as long as I can remember. Paul Schimmelman for doing a lot of coaching with me even today. He's down in Texas State. There are a lot of people in Texas who fence that I like. Like, now I want to call out Houston Sword Sports because I have a really good relationship with all of them. Liz and Dan, their head coaches, and Tommy down in Olympian, and I've already called out AFC. So I'm sure I'm missing a ton of people, but there are a lot of people in Texas that fence that I really like, and I like seeing at tournaments and are just very beneficial for the sport. So most of the Texas coaches and clubs and fencers and actually there's one, recreational clubs.
Okay.
Just in general, more love to recreation, because we're that weird hybrid. Like, we are a competitive club. Like, we're not pure competitive, but there are a lot of clubs that don't have electric gear, that don't do anything but like basic foil or basic epee or basic saber and dry gear. And I'd love it for if there were more of them, if they were sort of an inroad to like, here's the competitive club that you go to now that you've been fencing with me for a while. So more of them would be nice, but those coaches are absolutely wonderful doing that sort of thing. So
cool. And outside of fencing, this might be hard. What are your goals?
Oh, I've struggled with that one for years, years and years. I mean, generally speaking, to be happy, to live a life that I'm proud of living. Now we get a musical accompaniment to go with the tail end of this thing. So, I'm happily married. I like supporting my wife in whatever she does as well. I think my goals fundamentally are just to do the things that interest me and that make me happy, and to do them as well as I can. I like getting better at things. Like, if there's one overarching thing, it's that I like getting better at things. So, yeah, that's about it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Peter.
Yeah,
for being with us. This was fun. We'll see you around at tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you want to tell everybody your website, your Instagram?
RoundRockFencingClub.com. If you've got any questions for us, you can email coaches@RoundRockFencingClub.com or info@RoundRockFencingClub.com. We've got our main facility is here in Round Rock. We've got a satellite program in Lakeway. That one is pretty much recreational. But here in Round Rock, Monday through Thursday is the bulk of the fencing that we do. And I at least, and maybe one or two of the other coaches, will occasionally be at tournaments throughout the next couple of years. So,
what time are those classes?
Monday, Wednesday is 5 to 7. Tuesday, Thursday is 5:30 to 7:30. Get in touch with me before you come, just so I don't have unexpected people we're not ready for. But yeah, it's been fun to do. But thank you all for doing it.
And we are Go Fence Academy, Lewisville, GFW.
Yeah, you can shout them out too.
Monday through Friday from 5:30 till the end of the day. Saturday 11 till 2, and Sunday we all.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.